Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of A Second Chance Stories of Young Offenders. We're your hosts, Calista Lynn,
Akshara Keshri.
And Sophia Luisi.
and today we have an extraordinary guest whose journey is an embodiment of resilience and advocacy.
That's right, everyone. We are honored to introduce you to Mecks Mac, a dedicated mental health advocate, prison reformist, and social justice warrior. Mecks, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Mecks, it's truly a privilege to have you on our podcast. So let's start by exploring your background. Could you share with our listeners how you experienced working in a maximum and medium security prisons influenced your path as an advocate for prison reform?
Yeah, so my first job out of my undergrad was at a maximum security prison as a drug and alcohol counselor. And it was while I was working there that I saw the injustices that incarcerated people face that really kept me up at night and really showed me the need for prison reform and that incarcerated people needed assistance because not a lot of people outside of the system knows what's going on behind the walls.
Your journey from working as a drug and alcohol counselor to becoming an aftercare coordinator within the Department of Corrections specifically is just incredibly impactful. Could you shed some light on some of the injustices you've witnessed, specifically from beyond the prison walls, and how they fueled your passion for this reform?
Yes. So when I was the drug and alcohol counselor within the organization that we worked with, I worked with Fergadenzia, and the gentlemen that were in our program, they were drug tested every now and then. And if they got a positive urine test, they would lose all of their good days. And so a lot of people had like 2 years plus, like years on taken off of their sentence. And it's as a drug and alcohol counselor, like relapse is part of the process. And that was a institutional rule. Like it wasn't coming from us. And we even when I heard that rule, I was like, dude, do they not understand that relapse is a part of addiction and that drugs and alcohol are quite popular within the walls? Like, there's a lot of CEOs bringing them in. It's not just, a lot of people think that the incarcerated people are the ones responsible for paraphernalia behind the walls, but there's something that needs to be talked about is the fact that there are dirty correctional officers and they're the ones that bring in drugs and stuff like that, but yet they don't get penalized as often as incarcerated people do. And I think I really did not like that rule because since I had been there were like multiple men that came up positive and lost all their good days. So, and then they didn't want to continue working in the program. They thought that we were the ones taking away their years off of their sentence. And so that's one of the things that I saw at the maximum security prison. When I was at the medium security prison, there was a lack of professional staff. Like I trusted the incarcerated people more than I trusted the staff at the medium security prison. And going from the maximum security prison to the medium security prison, I saw that I had this theory that the lower the level of security of the institution, the lower the level of professionalism and trustworthiness. And then it wasn't until I became incarcerated at a detention center that I saw how correct that theory of mine was, because the detention center is like the lowest of the low. Like if there's like, they have a bunch of different levels of like crimes and stuff like that, but it's supposed to be like that's the beginning entrance for people going into the criminal justice system. I slipped up and said criminal injustice system. Sorry.
That's valid. That's
how I feel about it. But yeah, so just the lack of professionalism that leads to all of these different, people not being fed and, not having their, biological needs being met, and overcrowdedness, and just, people aren't getting set up with when I was working as an aftercare coordinator, they weren't setting them up with a safe place to go when they were released. They were just like, oh, gotta go. And there are people that are in the prison system that are supposed to be doing that, and that's not happening. And that's an issue from that, is that they're just overworked. There's like one case manager for like hundreds of incarcerated people, and it's just, there's just a lot of dynamics that go into that. But those are a few of the injustices that I've seen while working there.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I feel like what you're trying to say, and what I feel like as well, is that in today's justice system, like, so many of the incarcerated individuals, they're so misunderstood. And I feel like there's so much stigma that surrounds them that, like a lot of the times people don't even know like what's going on behind. They just think, oh, he got arrested, oh, he's incarcerated, he's probably a bad person. But they don't realize that like they're probably influenced by their peers, or they have pressures from other people. And there's just a lot of things that society doesn't see that's actually happening behind these prison walls.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's why I wrote my book. I wrote my book, Out of the Ashes I Rise, Surviving BCDC, which is, it goes into detail about what people are experiencing at a detention center. And and it's just, it needs to be talked about, and we need to change people's mentality from lock them up, throw the key, as opposed to let's really understand what leads to crime, criminality, and reoffending. And another injustice that I found, well, I kind of touched on it, is not setting people up with safe homes to go to, like safe places to go live and continued treatment, and jobs. That, like, not having those things set up for people leads to re-offending, keeps people stuck in the criminal justice system. And that's kind of designed the way that they wanted to design it. The people that work in the power that be to be able to change those things can change those things, but they don't want to, because they're making the money off of people being incarcerated and all of that. So that's a really great point that you just made, that people need to understand that there are like more than just, oh, a bad person went and shot someone, or oh, a bad person did whatever. Like there's so many different factors that go into why people do what they do, and a lot of it stems from trauma as a children, and not getting the treatment that they need at that time, and all of that. So I could go on. I'm sorry.
No, please do. So going back to what you were saying about the stigma, right? I know that working in a prison is very difficult. And I know as a woman, you're probably breaking barriers working in a prison and being like a quote unquote role model for them. So what's the most dangerous experience you faced that made you doubt yourself, but then got you to move back into your job and start loving it again?
Well, the most dangerous experience that I faced while I was working, when I was at Patuxent, I didn't have any dangerous, nothing. I was never, I'm a sexual assault survivor, and I was actually really nervous to go into the prison and work with rapists and sex offenders and that kind of a thing. Not one of the men that I worked with triggered me. They all respected me. There was one gentleman that kind of like wrote like a very lovingly poem to me, and that was addressed with the chief of staff. So like I said before, the maximum security prison that I worked at was run very professional, and I think that's a reflection of the training that the staff got. However, when I was at Central Maryland Correctional Facility, I was locked in a room with 8 incarcerated men by a sergeant correctional officer. And while I was locked in that room, none of the men touched me, none of them approached me, none of them assaulted me. And I waited until another officer came down and saw that we were locked in the room. He came and opened the door and let us out. And that was actually my first trigger, my first flashback to being sexually assaulted in high school. And I had to like maintain my demeanor, because I knew if I lost my crap, I would be more vulnerable and more susceptible for someone to be like, oh, her guard is down and she like attack or something. I don't know. So I think that's an interesting question that you bring up, is that, the people that I didn't trust, like, were the staff, correctional officers. I trusted at and it was after that moment, after that experience, I definitely stopped trusting the correctional staff. They're there to keep staff safe as well as incarcerated people safe from each other. And, when they're attacking fellow staff people, then that's an issue. And my family attempted to sue the institution, and they didn't get too far with that, because these institutions are protected very well. But yeah, so I had an amazing experience working with the incarcerated men. I didn't have any threats from them. And I think that goes to show that when you respect someone, because I was never afraid of them. I definitely was I was always aware of my surroundings, because something could have happened. I could have been shanked, or I could have, been grabbed or groped or anything like that. And I was kind of expecting that. But it never happened. And I think that's because I carried myself in a way that I respected the men that I worked with, and I carried myself as a professional. And that energy is be seen. Like, I've worked with a bunch of different populations, and incarcerated people are the most aware, and they watch, and they like to see, they're very good with picking up vibes, like, oh, that's a professional, or that's a victim, and I can do something with that person, that kind of a thing. And they knew that I respected them. They knew, and I wasn't afraid of them. I had walked down the hall at the maximum security prison, and there were like 20 incarcerated men waiting to go into commissary, but I had to get back to the office to do work. And so I just walked down the hall, and there was another administrative staff behind me, and she was like, oh, excuse me, you need to stop and wait till the men go by, or whatever, because she was afraid. And I was like, and the men were just sitting there, and they witnessed this interaction, and I just was like, I'm fine. Like, I'm not afraid of these guys. Like, and if someone touches me, I'll take care of that the way I will take care of that. And none of them touched me. And like, that shows them that I wasn't afraid of them. And that, so, and the administrative person that had said something to me, she was another woman. That's the energy that they give out, that they work there. There are people that work in the prison system that are scared of them. And it's like, if you're afraid of these people, why are you even here? Because that's a security risk for you and your fellow staff, and for the incarcerated people.
I understand, and I think that's a really good message to show that, why are you working there if you're afraid when you should be helping? And also, it's shown that your experiences have driven your advocacy efforts. So, just to kind of jump onto a different subject, you work closely with Maryland state legislators to advance mental health initiatives and prison reform bills. Could you tell us more about your advocacy work and some of the initiatives you've been involved in?
Yeah, so I started working. I was volunteering with NAMI, a National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a nationwide organization. And so I was working with the one in Maryland, and they do Advocacy Day every year. And so that's how I got into working with state legislators. And at their Advocacy Day, we met with legislators, and we shared our personal stories about mental health initiatives. And I started working with them, and then through working with them, I got hooked up with another organization, Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform, and that opened the doors for me to testify in the Senate, because I would go and I would share my story, and I was completely honest with them. I would tell them, everything that I experienced, and they would just be like, oh my gosh, they didn't know what was going on. So, by doing my work with NAMI and going and getting involved with that, I testified in the Senate 2 years ago on a prison reform bill for correctional ombudsman, to have an oversight of incarcerated people's grievances and stuff like that. So yeah, that would be one of the things that I've worked with for legislators within Maryland.
I don't know how you just be able to pass bills to change the world. That's amazing. I don't know. That's so heroic, And you're
Yeah.
also a member of RAIN, of the Speaker's Bureau of RAIN, right? So how
Yeah.
did these affiliations, also with NAMI, NAMI, I forgot how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
NAMI.
yeah.
How do these affiliations or connections contribute to your mission, and what role do they play in specific role do they play in your efforts to raise awareness about mental health?
They're all interrelated, because trauma can leads to mental illness, and mental illness leads to incarceration and addiction and all of these things, and trauma does that too. You don't need to be mentally ill to be addicted, but they all my purpose, my goal is to help other people not experience what I experienced. And when I come across an organization that really is something that I stand for, that I appreciate what they're doing, RAIN, Rape and Abuse Incest National Network, based in DC. That organization does a lot of speaking engagements on sexual assault, and it gives rape victims a voice. And what I've experienced through all of my traumas and situations is that most people don't want to listen to victims, or they don't want to listen to people that have a mental illness. And these organizations provide that platform for people such as myself to share our story, to help others. And I think the biggest way that we can help each other is saying, hey, I went through this and I got through this, and this is how I got through it, and you can too.
That I have no words. That's amazing. Mental health is deteriorating, after COVID, and that's really an important message. And I'm sure you've made such a big impact on other people with the messages that you just leave in general, and your efforts in your book. And as we wrap up this amazing, insightful conversation, what last minute message or advice would you give with our listeners, or survivors, or advocates for change, or anyone just in general? What would your advice be?
I would say that anyone can become incarcerated. My own experience, I never committed. What I have been incarcerated for were things that I didn't do, and I still ended up being incarcerated for 13 months total. And I am not a criminal, and we need to start looking at crime and the criminal justice system through the lens of how people are being treated. And that, just because someone is incarcerated or coming out of incarceration doesn't mean they're casted away, and that we need to remember that there's someone's son, there's someone's daughter, there's someone's mom, there's someone's aunt, there's someone's brother. These are people that are human beings and should be treated as such. And then for anyone going through incarceration, anyone victim of rape, or someone living with a mental illness, is that you are not diminished by your experiences, you're not diminished by your diagnosis, and you deserve and should have all of the things that you want to work towards, and you can reach them. And you got to keep your head up and stay strong, and know that you are not alone, and that there is help out there, and that you can reach your goals.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing and really inspiring. Mecks, we're really grateful for your presence and the vital work that you do in the fields of mental health advocacy and prison reform. And, I think we all think that your story is one of resilience and hope, and that redemption is possible. Like in your case, you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But, I think it's just really inspiring to a lot of individuals out there who maybe are in similar situations as you, or are still fighting for that comeback. And it's been an honor to have you as a guest.
I appreciate that. And I do, even if someone has committed a crime, I feel like they're human beings, and I'm no better than they are. And people can change, and people can get the help that they need. And once they get the help that they need, they can be the person that God had intended them to be. And that's for anyone. And I believe that seriously, for any person that's incarcerated, there is hope, there is redemption, and God loves you, and I love you, even though I might not know you personally, but I would come and help and give you the resources and anything that you would need. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And thank
Don't
you
worry
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
We're sorry we had to cut the meeting short.
Okay,
It's 40 minutes.
I completely understand. It's all good.
But to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of A Second Chance Stories of Young Offenders. Until next time, remember that your story is still being written, and that there's always hope for a brighter future. See you guys next time.
Thank you.